Hello and welcome
to the Hainun Couples Podcast,
where we empower blessed couples
to deepen the love, fostering mutual pleasure, connection, and joy.
So let's dive in.
Hey everyone.
Welcome to the Hainun Couples Podcast.
In today's episode, we want to discuss masturbation within a blessed couple.
We are honored to have Andrew Love as our guest today, and he will share his insights on the subject. So, we're looking forward where this journey is leading us today.
Yeah, so let's begin. So, hey, Andrew.
Hey.
Nice to have you here.
Hey.
Thank you for inviting me to the internet.
The World Wide Web. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the Hainun Couples Podcast. And today's topic is on masturbation in the blessing.
Yeah, and actually we thought we just wanted to, first of all, ask you personally, and also asked you as a representative for Hainun what their stance is on masturbation within the blessing.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, this is the greatest topic, to talk about, because it's like whenever we give this talk, so, we started traveling, and always during Q&A, masturbation was an inevitability. So then I was tasked with just making a talk so that we can skip the whole, I wonder if they have any questions about masturbation. Everybody does, because it's the thing that nobody talks about. And so I always start the talk out just by flashing on the screen the word masturbation and just letting it sit there and let everybody sit with that word displayed on a giant screen. And it's so incredibly awkward for them. For me, it used to be something that's super awkward to talk about, but you just get used to it. And so I think it's extremely liberating to be able to sit together with this topic and understand that likely what we're about to discuss will trigger some people from left to right and up to down. Yeah. Some people will feel judged, and some people will feel validated because they're like, wait a second, that makes a lot of sense. Other people will have a lot of questions, and that's good, right? And that's the whole Hainun way, is that we never show up anywhere claiming to know everything. We've just made this our priority to figure this stuff out for ourselves and for anybody who's willing to go down. But we'll be the first one digging the hole to try to figure out these topics and to go with True Parents' words, a lot of prayer, a lot of debate. And so that's where I'm coming from. I just wanted to give that up front, because I think I've heard this from a couple of people, that my voice is literally their annoying conscience voice, my voice haunts their dreams, because I just say stuff that sometimes they don't want to hear, So anyway, I just wanted to give that preface that I don't know everything, but we've thought a lot about this stuff, and we're in a very good place about it ourselves.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It makes total sense. Even the curiosity on finding out different ways or understand and speaking out the truth, and to sit in that comfortable space comfortably. Yeah.
That's the craziest thing, is that anything that we talk about is uncomfortable until it just becomes comfortable. And that's just a matter of familiarity. And also you doing your own work to figure out what you actually think and feel about a certain topic. And a lot of people gravitate towards convenient answers. They either reject something, they accept something, but seldom do they understand things deeply. And when you have a deep intimacy with a topic, people can't take away your belief or your understanding. They can challenge it, they can grow it, it can expand. Hopefully, we're constantly expanding, but at its core, you've done the deep work to figure out a level of deep comfort with a particular topic. And masturbation, I think, is one of those that it's worth the effort to figure out not what do your parents say, or did your parents say, or what does this random person on YouTube say, or some psychologist. I'd love to get into that. Some psychologist on Psychology Today, that whenever people used to read magazines, but to figure out what you think and feel, not as an initial reaction, but as a well-acquainted, familiar conclusion that you've come to based on a lot of work.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Do you remember the question from the start?
Wow. Am I turning into a politician? No, I don't. I don't even remember it. I just talk.
Okay,
what is it?
Well, maybe you could answer, first of all, from Hainun's perspective. Yeah, what is, maybe in a brief way, because we'll get to another,
Yeah, that the purpose of sex is it's not for yourself. That's spoiler alert, it's not for yourself. And masturbation is entirely for yourself, and it's about the body. So what we've been teaching is that we've definitely been poisoned with selfishness in terms of our sex. And there's no way of justifying masturbation as being altruistic, because it's ultimately just about pleasuring yourself. Self-pleasure. I mean, it's by definition. But yeah, we really steer clear of heaven and hell, good or bad, black and white. It's much more, what is the purpose of the sexual organ? That's where we guide people in this conversation, because otherwise you just end up slinging turds, right? So that's why we had to craft this talk very carefully. And I came up with a thesis and I bounced it off the team and we debated a lot. And the High Noon official stance is, it all comes down to what is the purpose of the sexual organ. And that's something that our movement, thanks to True Parents, have a wealth of resources to reference. True Father talked a lot about it. Not True Mother so much. I feel like she's a lot more modest. I think women are a lot less expressive publicly about their sexual organs. But True Father was a bit of a renegade in that way. And so, yeah, it comes down to what is the purpose of the sexual organs. And I do have some quotes that we can go over whenever you guys want. But True Father talked a lot about it. And there's a deep meaning well beyond the physical act of sex. The physical act is a part of it, but it's not the entirety. So, yeah. That's the shortest I could go.
Yeah. What I liked is that you said it's not black and white, it's not good or bad. It's as more kind of what is really the purpose of it, the sexual organ, sex itself, how it's connected to Heavenly Parent as well, the principle of creation, right? So yeah. It's more complicated than that.
Well, and I just want to give a shout out, because I've given certain talks and I had some older members come up to me and they were pretty insistent on the fact that, like, oh, but True Father said it's okay to masturbate because we were missionaries and we didn't get to see our wives for 10 years or whatever. It's like, well, look, when you're in wartime rules are very different than peacetime rules. Let's just get that clear. The standard of love is not to be separated from your spouse for a decade at a time. That's clearly just a part of the building phase of, at that time, it was the building phase of our movement. So I can't speak to that, but I can tell you what Chanuguk, we're trying to answer for and solve for. What is Chanuguk? What is a whole person? What does a healthy relationship look like? And in that, selfishness has no place, right? Selfishness is a byproduct of immaturity. Again, it's not like you're evil per se. That's very dangerous terminology. It's much more just a level of immaturity. And that's why we're not here to cast a wand and say, you are either good or bad. Which one, and we divide rooms based on the sinners and the saints. That's just stupid. And it's a part of the religious world of old. The era of Chanuguk is much more about the nuance and understanding, like adults understand things that kids cannot understand. It's about maturity. So let's talk about sex more holistically, and where the physical act and self act of gratification fits into that, if at all. It's much deeper than how people normally talk about it, right? It's just like, oh, I want to, or it's fine with me. It's like, okay, well, what are you striving for in your life? Because we're not, even High Noon at large, we're never going around telling people what to think. We're just helping people get to the blessing and to live the fullest blessed life, if that's their goal. If their goal is to, the guy that wrote most of the translations in one of the dictionaries went mad and he cut off his penis in jail with, anyway, I don't want to tell you how, but it was brutal. If that's what you want to do with your penis, we're not here to debate with you, right? That's a different standard. We're just here to be like, according to True Parents and according to the blessing, the standard of love is really high, not easy to get it to, but it's not worth quitting if you're not there yet.
Right. And it takes work, it takes time, and it's like in everything, like life, just...
So Andrew, you were saying that, did I understand it right, that there is... The understanding seems to be very different between, let's say, first gen and second gen, because first gen had such a different life. We were talking about the 10 years of life, or, whatever, the separation. So there would be maybe different experiences that they had when they were 30 or 40. And now we're in that age, 20, 30, 40, and we're trying to have a very different, or we hope for that, we have a different standard than our parents could teach us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can see why they would be, I don't know, is it offended? Is that the word?
Well, again, we don't cast judgment or say that what you did was wrong or anything like that, but this is a different era. If you have any relationship to our faith, it's very clear that is the overarching theme, is that this is an evolution. And we are now entering a different phase of humanity, which is Chanoguk. And we're etching out new terrain in the cosmos to figure out how do we exist on this planet and potentially beyond, who knows, as children of God instead of as broken people. And sex is a massive part of that. And so you can't use the old rules and old systems to design a new world, a new existence, a new reality. You have to create a new paradigm based on, starting with first principles and like the fundamentals. And so sex has to be completely re-understood and completely reworked based on something true, something that can be long lasting, right? Eternal, unchanging, these kind of things, right? Sex is a part of that. If God is eternal and unchanging, then so should sex, right? The elements of sex. There's also, anyway, I'll leave it there. You can tell I'm just like one of those music boxes and you just wind it up and I'll just sing forever.
Yeah. What are some of the common ways masturbation can affect the intimacy and connection between a couple?
Yeah. So, I mean, I often give my testimony as just an example because, again, we try to add testimonies in very pointed and meaningful ways. So it's not about us, but it's helping to personalize this. It's not about ideas necessarily or theory. But when my wife had our second son, she was really out of it for quite some time, years, right? Where she was just not, she lost a big part of herself. We realized some of it. She had depression. She had all sorts of stuff. She had some spiritual stuff going on. It was really wild. And she just was not able to be there for me emotionally. And she was definitely not able to be there for me sexually, right? And so she kind of was just like, I don't know, take care of yourself. And so I was like, well, I guess that's permission, right? And I'm a man because we hear I'm a man. So, and men are just like one step on the ladder higher than dogs, according to certain people, right? We're just like these horny animals. If you really hear how men are described, we often believe and women often believe that we're just basically primal, savage, sexual beasts, right? And so when you hear something like that, my wife gave me permission. I was like, okay, well, I'm a guy. I have needs. So therefore, the conclusion is I'll start to masturbate. And this is 4 years into our marriage, something like that. And I did maybe a couple times. And I was about to another time because I was like, I got to take care of me, you know, this type of spirit. And then I just stopped myself for a second. I was like, my body really wants this. And then I thought, well, where's my wife right now? I was like, oh, she's in a room. And what's she doing right now? She's all alone. Why is she all alone? Because she's not feeling well. And what am I doing? I'm serving myself instead of my wife. And I was like, I am using my sexuality right now, or I'm about to, in order to fantasize about a wife that I wish I had, because the real wife that I have is struggling and I'm not dealing with my stuff. So I'm using sex as a form of escape rather than a form of connection. And I couldn't express it that way because this is pre-high noon. Now I can process it and understand it and say it in these words. But back then, it was just a feeling of like, this isn't right, right? So that's the thing, is that it's true of masturbation and it's true of the act of sex as well. If you use sex as a form of escape rather than a form of connection, it will inevitably and invariably drive the couple apart, further apart. And sex will be a tool to divide rather than to unite and connect. And because what you're doing is you're putting something in between you and your spouse, and that is fantasy. That's what porn is. You're putting all these, you know, woman or whatever, these situations in your head and your heart, and that divides you and your spouse. And it's the same with masturbation. It's not about that person. It's about you creating some world. I think C.S. Lewis called it, you know, you're indulging in a harem of fantasies, self-serving fantasies, something like that. So it's really just about wanting to feel powerful, you know? You're not addressing the need as to why you're feeling sexual. Because again, the immature world that we came from is just like, oh, sex is sex. You want sex. We're animals, right? So if we're just animals need sex, period. That's the end of the story. But when you start to understand more deeply that sex always has a precursor, and that precursor is always emotions, then you realize, oh, I'm serving an emotional need through sex because that's how I've served, that's how I've escaped, or that's how I've, you know, I don't know, just like self-pacified is a great term. That's my blankie. My masturbation is just the adult version of my blankie when I was a kid. It's this thing that when I feel scared and overwhelmed by life, all of a sudden life makes sense now for a brief moment because I can run away from it all and I can create this scenario in my head where everything's perfect and everybody's serving me, right?
Yeah, where you're the center, not someone else or the whole. Yeah, it kind of answers the question. Like, next question I would have is that I've talked with some couples and sisters and brothers as well. And there are couples that see masturbation as harmless or even beneficial, right? And
Sure, sure.
and as you said, it's like it is kind of this emotional. There's something emotional that actually needs something, and then masturbation is just like to cover it up, or kind of the blankie or the pacifier, or it's like to hide away from it. Or in our modern days, it's also the phone. It's kind of covering it up on then feeling better afterwards and feeling fulfilled and having an orgasm. But for example, as you also said, like a lot of psychologists, a lot of people say it's so beneficial because it's releasing stress, especially for women as well.
Sure.
And if you do that, then you feel oxytocin is coming up, and I think it's called oxytocin.
Yeah.
And then you feel much more relieved there, and then you can go on with your day because before you were stressed, and then you release the stress through masturbation, and then you feel better. Especially, for example, for me as a woman, the husband is not home, also in the future, having kids, having a short time, I was like, oh, it's quiet, I can relax a little bit, I can either sleep or do the deed with myself.
Yeah.
So you say there's always
A
a
justification.
justification to do it, because it will always, like, you will never have no justification to do it, right?
Right, yeah.
You just counted up so many things.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly urgent for people to understand that there's always a price to be paid. You either pay before or you pay after. And so this idea of sex is when it's on the foundation of a couple who've done the work. They've put the work in. They've invested in each other as humans. They've invested in caring about each other. Then what sex becomes is a celebration of that foundation, of all that hard work. It's like, especially after a difficult time, after you've been fighting a lot, sex is like, yesterday I wanted to run out the door, or I wanted to strangle you, but today we're making love. Like, this is a miracle. This is a true celebration of the highest form. That's the payment comes beforehand, right? Whereas with something like masturbation, what are you serotonining about? What is causing you to release all these chemicals? It's not earned. And so there's just reams of information about dopamine, and like when you like pull that lever and release dopamine without having worked for it, you end up feeling worse in the end. It's a net negative. And masturbation is a massive part of that, which is like, what is the feedback loop? When you release, and that's what an orgasm is, it's the ultimate release. What is reverberating back to you is nothingness. You're masturbating to a void, to the emptiness of nothing. And so what happens is you're opening your soul and nothing is returned. So you lose a little piece of yourself to this fantasy that has now power over you instead of you over it, right? Whereas true lovemaking is like the release together, especially as a couple, is the reverberation of the expression of I love you and I'm here for you. I was just thinking about this the other day about women offering themselves and saying yes to the act of sex. It's the most vulnerable that they could ever be. Physically, mentally, emotionally, because they could completely be dominated by men and hurt and abused, and they're again emotionally, they could be tricked, they could be impregnated. It's such an incredibly vulnerable place. So in order to say yes, you're saying yes to the entire man. And so when that's then the right choice, you get this massive hit of I made the right choice. And when it's to nothingness, you're like nothing. There's nothing that comes back to you. There's no sense of belonging in this universe. You are now more floating in the ocean than you are standing on your own 2 feet. And I'm telling you, there's a compounding effect. This is a part of it. I'm not saying it's the whole reason, but it's massively a part of why our human condition is drifting right now, and so many people are suffering from anxiety, depression, and all these things, is because there's nothing tethering them to a life that makes sense. There's nothing that gives them validation of their own humanity. And sex is such it's an integral part of that. Is a form of validation that I have a place in this universe together with this person. And that's why it's so annoying, because you don't always get it when you want. And sometimes you fight. But that's the beauty of it, is you got to work for it. And when you don't, you pay the price after by feeling more estranged, more alone. And again, yeah, there's plenty of people. There's so many psychologists. Psychologists are typically talking about the brain. They don't acknowledge the soul. They don't acknowledge the impermanence of the body and the permanence of the eternal nature of things. And our understanding and the way that true parents talk about it is that there's an eternal element to sexuality as well, which is cementing. It's like creating a strand of DNA between a couple, one kiss at a time, and making love is like one twist of the DNA strand at a time. It's like huge. And you're building this relationship through all trials and tribulations, and the cementing of it is in literal form sex. And so it's such an important point. That's, again, I think the older first generation didn't get. They were just running because they're being attacked from all sides, and you just fight or flight. You don't have time to talk romantically when you're just stressed out all the time, right? But now in this era, when we have room to breathe, this is what life is about. It's about the romance, sure, but it's much more about the celebration of eternity through the transcendence that is sexuality. And true sex is transcendent. It's like when you're able to reclaim your mind and just give it to that person. You're not thinking about other stuff. You're just giving it to that person. And Mitsue talks a lot about this. She's had to discipline herself to not think about the laundry during sex or whatever. She's like, and porn does that like crazy. It intoxicates you with all these other kind of deviations of reality instead of just being there with that person. One person, not many. So to like offer your full undivided attention to that person and just to be there in that moment actually is a form of meditation, because because you're just so present that you're everywhere. It's like you transcend all things, and it's the most miraculous, and it's really hard to get to. Again, that's not every time you have sex at all, but that's like something to strive for, and only comes on the foundation of all this work, all of which you miss out on when you masturbate, right? Because masturbation just teaches you about your own physical urges. That's it.
Wow. You hit on so many good points. Is there a short
This is the theme of your questions.
How masturbating in a relationship can impact your relationship with heavenly parents?
Yeah.
Partner.
And your partner. More the spiritual topic, since we all know about potential spiritual influences.
But also like your spiritual, like as you said, our soul. It's not just about the brain. It's also like how it affects our emotional and spiritual body.
Yeah, so I'd love to kind of imagine a chart because we have a slide like this of a brain, a heart, and a spirit. It's really hard to figure out, a vector for a spirit. But imagine a brain, a heart, and a spirit. And in the brain, it's like, the masturbation model is to view sex as hormonal, not spiritual, right? Mm. So in that moment, you can think about this very practically. I'm horny, so let's have sex. So your body wants sex, but what triggered that? Let's look at that, right? Like, it's not all the time you have to analyze, why am I feeling horny right now, right? But on the whole, when you become a more thoughtful person, you're like, what is this about? Is it about because I really want to embrace my spouse, or is it because like I want to get mine? Maybe just saw something online and it stimulated something in you, right? So there's a very big difference between hormonal, which is your body's now subject, and spiritual, which is your heart or your ideals, your virtues are leading, right? So as a starting point, that's incredibly important, because we've talked to so many couples who've been married, blessed for 30, 40 years, and the beginning of their relationship, the man was very hormonal about sex. He's like, I need sex now. And he kind of demanded it of his wife. And what ended up happening was the wife was not feeling acknowledged or loved at all. And guess what happens? She stops wanting to have sex. They become a sexless couple. The man says, my wife is a prude, right? This has been, like, we've heard this so many times, but it's all because the seeds that were sown in the beginning were utterly selfish and hormonal, not about considering, how is my spouse feeling right now anyway? Are they in the mood? Are they okay? And it's a very different thing. Sex based on hormonal, like the body as subject, versus spiritual as subject. I can't talk to the influence of dark spirits and all that stuff. That's not our specialty. You know, I think everybody at High Noon, we've talked about this, has slightly different understandings. We don't have like a High Noon viewpoint on that. But I think an easier framework to say that is simple, and we can all agree on, is there's a very big difference between sex through the hormones, through the body leading the way, versus sex and the heart or the spirit leading the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And when you said at the beginning of the relationship that the husband is very horny or really wants to have a lot of sex, I can very much relate with that.
The beginning of our relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt like really overwhelming, and exactly as you said, it's like not really that both of our pleasure or how we both do was in the center. It was kind of like, no, I want to have sex. And there was like, for me at the point, it's like, I actually don't want it anymore. And I felt kind of, it became uncomfortable, and it was just about the sex act.
Yeah.
And again, as you said already, it's at the beginning of the relationship, and where both of us maybe not as much sure and having the understanding of it, what it actually means. And then there was actually a point where I had, oh my gosh, how's it called?
Chocolate cake?
No. No, I couldn't have sex for like a week or more.
Okay.
Because it was, I had an infection.
Oh, okay.
And
UTI? Probably.
No. It
Doesn't matter what the infection
bacterial.
actually. I shouldn't have.
Bacterial.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay.
So, and it was even wanting to have sex and becoming horny was actually painful. So every sensation down there was really uncomfortable. And so we were just able to cuddle. And that was so nice. And afterward it became so much nicer. Like we started to cuddle more, to kind of be touching, having more physical touch. And it became through that way more intimate and kind of connected as well. And it felt like this very uncomfortable experience came to a point where it's like, oh, okay, actually we feel more, we enjoy each other way more, and kind of looking out for each other more.
Yeah.
And it took like half a year or so until we came to that point.
Yeah, to each their own, you know, and that's the part about the blessing that, if we had been talking about sex earlier, could have saved many blessings. Because if you feel, and it's a legitimate feeling, right? If a man desires sex but their wife doesn't desire him, it's very easy for him to feel rejected entirely. Like, you're rejecting me as a human. He's like, I'm nothing to you. It's a form of validation for us. And so if like we're supposed to only get this from one place in the world, and that one place in the world doesn't want us, then it's like, well, what are we supposed to do? And then the rest of the world is saying, well, you're sexual beings, so you need to have sex. Then what are you supposed to do, right? But I forgot to say this in the beginning. The most eloquent way of expressing this is the purpose of sex is intimacy. The whole purpose of sex, all forms of sexual acts, is to feel closeness. Intimacy is a sense of closeness, two hearts feeling like they're one. And so, that whole thing of like when one person forces themselves on the other, what ends up doing, it closes those hearts. Because now you associate sex with pain, physically or emotionally, or you're like, this person isn't considerate of me. And masturbation absolutely teaches you like, but I'm horny, so it doesn't matter how you feel, right? It's like, make me happy now. That's how so many young men got through high school, to be honest, is like because they didn't know how to deal with their emotions. But again, a huge part of it is figuring out what is the precursor to this sexual feeling? Like, where's this coming from? And that's what we try to teach people as they're single too, with when they're like really wanting porn, is like, where did that come from? That's not like a biological need to stare at your phone and watch other people have sex. There's nothing biological about that. That's purely conditioning, 100%. There's no form of animal on the planet anywhere that stares at phones and watches other of the same animals have sex. It's like, it's madness. It's a form of madness, right? But masturbation is the same thing. It's like, why are you feeling so sexual? And the more that you can understand that, is you can understand the hand that controls the puppet. Because your emotions are controlling you in that moment, and it's using sex, which is a very convenient tool to control you. So we're in Thailand right now, and we're in a place called Pattaya. I didn't know what this place was. We had to come here for a visa run. We're just here for a few days, and there's a lot of sex trafficking here, and we didn't know that. We just went for a walk down this district, and we're like, that's crazy. I was like, so I've had a lot of talks with my kids about some really deep stuff. But I can see that out here, there's men that come from especially Europe shout out. But I've noticed just an inordinate kind of lopsided amount of European older, bald, fat men who come and purchase very young kind of Thai girls, right? And this all comes from the mindset of this masturbation, sex is hormonal. I'm justified. I want it. And it creates this sense of entitlement, which is very dangerous.
Yeah.
The masturbation mindset is inherently about entitlement.
Yeah.
That's what it trains you. And then when you enter a relationship, it's like, it just hurts people.
Yeah. How would you, or what would you say that could help a couple to have a conversation about masturbation? Because
Yeah.
it's kind of uncomfortable, right? It doesn't matter if it's the woman or if it's the husband, but having a conversation on that, it's sometimes pretty sure they hide it from each other. And we have experienced that if we hide it and then don't speak about it for a very long time, it hurts even more than just say it right after. Or even say it's like, I'm actually feeling really tempted to slip. And then it's like, oh, actually I did slip. And then we talk about it. But for couples that didn't have this conversation already or not at the point, how to start this conversation.
Yeah, start small. It can often hurt the other person if you just unload everything onto them. They might not be ready, especially if they're very sensitive or if they've had a difficult time with you already, right? So start small and just start general. Don't go straight to the specifics. Start with generalities and start small. And this is where spirituality definitely comes in. The practical nature of spirituality is praying together and working through it not alone. Ideally with other people if you can, but if it's super embarrassing and it's a very hot topic, then start small and general and prayerful. That's the best way, is just like praying together and trying to unravel something together as a couple will serve you so well over the course of your relationship, because it means that you can go through difficult times. That will make you stronger as a couple. These situations, if you just pause right now, and if you don't justify what you've done, but if you also don't shame yourself for what you've done and said, okay, this is just fact. This is something that I've done, but we can leverage this to become a stronger couple. And sure, I might be in the doghouse for a little bit if it really impacts them, but it's still a part of your story as a couple. You are unraveling historically this messy relationship that we've had with sex, right? And everybody has baggage. There's not a single couple out there that hasn't had some sort of baggage that they brought into the blessing, whether it's like, but there's definitely cultures where women have had a really bad go of sex for thousands of years because it's a very submissive culture in terms of women, right? And so they are very much fearful of the act of sex. And in that fear, they shut down and they don't talk about it, right? And so maybe you brought that into your marriage, but trust me, everybody has some sort of baggage coming into the marriage, coming into the blessing. And if you start small by, starting with a prayer or praying, just starting to pray, and then little by little being like, honey, I'd love to start understanding what your thoughts are about masturbation, and I'd love to express what my thoughts are, and I'd love to and don't try to fix it in one conversation. Don't try to do anything in one conversation. It's just, you start to create the culture of talking about these things. Again, goes back to earlier in the conversation, it normalizes it, becomes less fearful, it becomes a little bit more, okay, yes, you'll have these peaks of fighting, you smooth it out, and then you keep going back, and you have a lifetime to work through this stuff, but you need to, because to be naked and unafraid and unashamed, like Adam and Eve before the fall, this idea of like, is not physical. It's physical, mental, spiritual. It's definitely emotional. Just to be free with somebody and they know everything about me, and they still accept me. That's true love. That's unconditional love. But you have to reveal yourself in order to be accepted. But especially if you have back payments where you've made quite a few mistakes in the past, you have to unravel this more slowly than just trying to fix it in one conversation. That's unrealistic. That's the lottery mindset of like, oh, I just have one conversation and she'll forgive me and that's the end of it. That's what people are treating our movement like that right now. It's like, I just need one more grace ceremony and then everything's going to be okay. It's like, well, no, there's work after that. Even if you're forgiven, God forgives us every moment of every day. Heavenly Parent wants to have nothing to do with our mistakes, but it's us that bring us back to our mistakes by not working through them.
Yeah.
Doing it again. You guys cut me off. I'm talking to you.
It's again like the 95% we still have to fulfill.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's fun, guys. It's fun.
Sorry, it was the 5%. The way around. We have to fulfill our 5%. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Good call. I would just like to proffer the possibility, because it is a reality for people who adopt the high noon lifestyle, is it actually becomes fun to have difficult conversations because you get to go a layer deeper in terms of love, and you get to understand a realm of love that's not accessible to you, because right now you carry too much baggage climbing the ladder, and you have too much baggage. You got to shed some of that baggage in order to get to the next echelon. And so that baggage means having these conversations, but they open up, I'm telling you, new realms of understanding each other and trust. A couple that does that for years and years, when you see them, they are one. They're a couple that has woven this, this fabric of love throughout the course of years of a lot of difficult conversations. It's the greatest thing. That's why we're in the blessing. The fun stuff is a perk, but that stuff is what we keep. Nobody can take that away from us, is the effort of having these difficult conversations.
Yeah. I see that as well. Like this, since I guess a year or so, I more and more enjoy when we have difficult conversations or having fights. Like, I say we don't fight, but it's kind of a different understanding of fighting than, for example, my parents.
Difficult conversations.
Difficult conversations, having, difficult to connect or something. And I really enjoy to see how we grow individually from this situation, but also as a couple, and understand more how, for example, my past, my upbringing, my family of origin has kind of an influence of how I reacted or to triggers, for example, and then see I can react now differently.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
And guess what? That makes it easier for your kids. That's epigenetics. That's the coolest part, is like you're now creating a foundation greater than what you inherited. That's beautiful. So it's totally worth it. And even if you already have, for anybody out there who has kids, you're making it easier for them when they are blessed. Or if they are blessed, it makes it easier for them when they have kids or whatever. It start now. The whole point is to start. And the more work you do, the more that you're also liberating humanity, because we're just normalizing these conversations culturally. That's called Chanuguk culture. That's Hyojung culture, right? Is having difficult conversations. If our movement stopped for 2 years to try to do anything else other than just heal, we'd be the meanest, baddest force that God has ever been able to work through, because we'd be unstoppable, because we could have any conversation. It's in that fear of, oh, what if they found out who I really am? That Satan just has it's Satan's playground. It's like, I can screw you guys 7 million different ways just with this lack of conversation. I can make you feel like trash. I can make you feel like trash. I can make you start lying now. I can make you addicted to porn now, right? Having these conversations is like a safeguard against that darkness from coming in. Those are shadows. Sorry, Sebastian, you're about to say something, and then I cut you off.
I was about to say what we talked about in the beginning, which was masturbation usually has a trigger. It has a deeper emotional need that wants to be fulfilled. And when we talked about our situation where 2 weeks we couldn't have sex for 2 weeks, the time before that we weren't really
mature enough.
No, we weren't touchy. Like we wouldn't.
Oh yeah, we weren't not very physical, like physical touch.
Yeah, like also laying in bed, we didn't really cuddle, or like we were on a separate sides, and it was all So I guess I had a need for more physical touch and more closeness other than sexual, but I didn't know that until we experienced that apart time for 2 weeks, and then it was very clear to me afterwards when we came out of that troubled time. Was I that needy still sexually?
Sexually not, more physically touched.
Yeah,
he was like,
weird.
hey, all the time. I was like, oh.
That was his tether. You're keeping him on this planet. Yeah, it's so true. Like when you start unraveling this, like the work that we do with High Noon, and when people start to give themselves time to breathe, when they stop having this immediate reaction of, okay, I need to watch porn, and they just indulge. When they start giving themselves the space to think and to understand where is this coming from, so much of it can be resolved. So much of people's pain and longing to run away from life can be resolved by understanding that they just want a hug. They want somebody to look at them and say, hey, I love you. You're amazing. And that's what they're chasing with porn. It's not obvious, right? You're like, well, I just want to watch people naked having sex or whatever. But deep down inside, what they actually want is somebody to put a hand on their shoulder and be like, you're so cool. I love you so much, right? Spouses can do that for each other. And again, that's masturbation poorly understood is just a physical need that we all have according to psychologists, right? But according to something more holistic, a more holistic understanding that we're more than just a brain and a bunch of triggers, but that we're deeper than that we have a spirit, that we have a conscience that feels pain, that can relate to other people. If you factor those things in, it's so much richer and deeper. And when you feed yourself what you're actually craving, right? So if it's, I need validation, and find better ways to get validation through prayer, through you spending time with yourself, learning how to love yourself, to being okay with you, whatever. Everybody has their own cocktail of things that they need to resolve. Then sex is a billion times better afterwards, because you're coming into sex not as a needy, desperate person who wants that person to resolve your needs, but rather you're a full person who's coming to serve. And imagine you have two people who are really healthy and they just want to serve each other. That's called a good night. That's a fantastic time where you just afterwards you're like, woo, you know, you feel so much closer. You feel intimate. Yeah. You feel like I just had the greatest time with my eternal spouse. That's what it's all about. That feeling afterwards.
Yeah,
very different.
A huge. I feel also for us that the different times when we take really the time to connect before having sex and talk with each other. And I've heard from Indian woman on social media to kind of, you know, sometimes you're in with your head, you're just somewhere, like doing laundry or having to do this and that. And as you said, having to kind of switch off the brain on what needs to be done, like to do this. It's like, no, I need to be in the present. And she said making jokes, talking about something funny, apparently gossip, but kind of it's like, hey, how are you doing? And kind of snapping out of this, what is actually going on right now, and coming being present, coming to the moment and say, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
So that's why you were asking me the last night. I could tell you a joke. Now I understand. Such a random request. Now I understand.
Yes, that's why.
We've
served our purpose here. We got to the bottom of it.
Andrew, it really seems like there's so much more to unpack with this. Yeah. We will definitely get you on the show again.
And get other people. Yeah, I mean, Benji has... I was laughing because you were talking about these 2 weeks as though it was like the great drought of you know, like ancient Egypt, of 7 years of famine, you know? Benji knows years and years. He's the longest that I've heard of a young person who was not having sex with his wife. And he became a very strange person during that time because he didn't know how to process it. And he has a great testimony too, so I would suggest him. And it is definitely worth praying deeply about. We're getting to the point where all of the High Noon staff, we've been doing this for almost 10 years, right? And we're realizing that we're just scratching the surface. And I say the words, but I'm only touched by it seldom. The depth of what sex actually means to Heavenly Parent and to humanity. It's so much bigger than we have the capacity to understand presently. But the more that you pray about it, the more that, and it doesn't mean like, you know, every time you have sex as a couple that your face melts and your brain explodes or anything like that. It's we're a part of this great awakening of humanity because of the era that we're in, and sex plays such a major role in that, in our human evolution. And so much is resolved in healthy sexuality, in terms of us being whole people who stop making stupid decisions because we were so depraved since the fall, right? Just killing each other for no reason or whatever. Sex plays, it's not the only thing, but it's a massive component in that. And so I would just urge everybody to stop and have as many of these conversations as couples as possible, and to pray as much as possible. Read Core of the Universe as much as possible in True Parents' words. Can I just read one quote and then I promise I'll be done?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Where do man and woman unite? Through the sexual organs. This is where man and woman directly unite and become one with God. So first of all, that's crazy. Through the fall, the sexual organs came to be the worst thing, but originally they were extremely holy. When man and woman open that door, the world is opened. And when that door is closed, the world is closed. So that's just 3 paragraphs. But if you were to really go over that quote, I think that's in Core of the Universe. Again and again, you're talking about the world is open or closed to all of humanity based on our sex. And only in the 90s did true fathers start talking about absolute sex and this kind of stuff. And even then it wasn't really practiced. Now people are starting to prioritize it. So we're like at the forefront. We're at the tip of the spear of a new sexual revolution. The true sexual revolution, not the fake one that happened in the 60s, but the real one, the heavenly sexual revolution. So it's definitely worth talking about and praying about and understanding as a couple, because there's so much opportunity cost of not taking this seriously and to just do what you've always done. But everybody has their own course and we don't want to pressure anybody. So just keep on evolving. Please cut me off. I'm going to stop talking.
Andrew, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your insights and thoughts of 10 years of thinking about this and teaching it.
And helping people.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for always being so open. Thank you, everybody.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Andrew. And see you soon.